Hello, everyone. As you know, we have talked about many topics pertaining to geotechnical engineering. We have talked about soil formation. Once soil formation takes place, then how it is transported from the original location to the new locations by different agencies, right? We have talked about the water transported soil, wind transported, glaciers, the gravity, how these parameters are going to influence the soil. That means how these agencies are going to transport the soil particles from one location to the other locations, right? So we have also talked about the interparticle forces. That interparticle forces, how the one particle interact with the other particles by different bonding procedures, right? The attractive forces, repulsive forces, right? How it is going to interact to each other. We have also talked about dipolar nature of the water. What do you mean by the dipolar nature of the water? That also we have discussed in the previous topic. So today we shall talk about the soil structures. I would like to show you some figure. As I told you, that this soil formation takes place. It is transported by different agencies, right? And parallelly, the interparticle forces are going to work together, right? And the structures are also going to be formed. You see, as far as the soil structure is concerned, if you are going to make a one pit below the ground level, you can sit in the pit, right? Either by naked eye or using some microscope, you can see that how the nature has given the structure of the soil, how the soils are structured. You can see this figure, the below ground level. What are how the various layers are there? You can see these layers, and these layers, and below that the bedrock is there. So how this soil has been deposited, right, below the ground level in different layers, you can see by this figure. That means definitely different agencies had transported from the location where soil has formed, from that location to the other locations by different agencies. The soil has been deposited on the ground surface or in the form of a different layers also, you can see the different layers. You can see the next figure here also. You can see the color of the soils below the ground level. This structure also you can see. You can also see the structure of the soil below the ground level, how the structure has been formed, and it is a natural phenomenon. Nature has given these structures, right? And many times I have told you the soil formation is going to take place, and then transportation is also there. And after transportations, that continuous interparticle forces are also working below the ground level, and the structures of the soils are going to form below the ground level. One thing we can see, how one can disturb the structure of the soil, or we can say the natural structure of the soil which is available below the ground level, how it can be disturbed, how it can be deteriorate, or one can destroy. Suppose you are going to compact the soil, the structure of this structure is going to be disturbed, right? If you are going for cultivation, that means suppose any farmer is plowing the soil, the structure below the ground level is going to disturb. Removal of vegetation. While removing the vegetations or the plants, soil is also, the structure of the soil is going to disturb. Excessive moving and handling of soil. This will also cause the damage of the structures. So now we are coming to the main points, the soil structures. How we can define the soil structure? Geometrical arrangement of soil particles with respect to one another is called a soil structure. geometrical arrangements. You can see below the ground level how the nature has just how the different transportation agency, right, has deposited the soil in the form of a different structure, right? Natural agencies, the water transported soil. That's also natural agencies, right? Which has also transported the soil from the one location to the other location. So you can see the structure of the soil. So see the first structure is called a single grade structure. These structures are called a single grain structure. How? Cohesionless soil, such as gravel and sand, have a single grain structure. The particles settles out of the suspension in water as individual grains independently. Suppose the particles, gravel and sand, as we know, we have talked about the soil formation, physical disintegration, and the gravel and sands are going to be formed by the physical disintegration, whereas clay is going to be formed by the chemical decomposition. So you can see while deposition of these are called a cohesionless soil, gravel and sands are cohesionless soil. Once it is going to be transported by water, what is going to happen? The gravel and silt will settle, and the structure of the soil will form. The formation of structure of the soil will take place. And you can see the individual grains are going to settle down below the ground level. From the suppose it is being carried by water transported soil. So in that case, what is happening? The gravel and sand is going to settle individually. The particles will settle individually depending upon its weight, depending upon its magnitude. You see, the major forces causing their deposition is gravitational forces, which is also called mass-derived forces. That also we have talked that in coarse grain soils are going to be deposited by the mass-derived forces or gravitational forces, right? Occurred in coarse soil, and the surface forces which occurred in the fine grain soil due to attractive and repulsive forces, right? The clay soil, fine grain soil. But in case of this gravel and sand, these forces are too small, right? Too small, attractive and repulsive forces, which comes interparticle forces, which comes under the heading interparticle forces for the fine grain soil. So in case of single grain structures, these forces are very, very small. Only the gravitational forces normally acts on the coarse grain soil at the time of settlement from the water. The weight of the grains causes them to settle and get particle to particle contact on deposition, right? As the gravel and sands are going to be transported by the water, what is going to happen? Depending upon the weight of gravel and the sand, it will settle, right? And the structure will form. And the particle, you can see particle to particle contact. One particle will remain in contact of the other particle, and it will be deposited. Soil is broken into individual particles that do not stick together. As you know, the gravel, the sands does not stick together, does not, what we can say, they do not have cohesive property, right? It will not stick to each other. It will remain independent. You have seen that below the at the river bed, the sands are there. The particles are segregated. It is not sticking together, right? So the next point we can see, the next structure is the honeycomb structure. It is just like a honeycomb, okay? And this formation takes place, or you can see, it develops when the particle size is in between 0.02 millimeter and 0.02 millimeter. When the particle size is in between, right, the honeycomb structures formation takes place. When such grains settle under gravity, surface forces also play an equally important role. Suppose these particles are going to settle from the water, right? Because water transported soil, we have a study and in the topic transportation of soil. So suppose it is going to settle by the gravity. So in addition to that, surface forces are also going to work together. Surface forces means the attractive forces and repulsive forces are going to also work in the formation of soil structure. The grain coming in contact are held until a small arches are formed, bridging over relatively large void spacing and forming a honeycomb structure. You can see that the just like an arc, the formation is just like an arc below the ground level. Okay, the structure so formed has high void ratio and is capable of carrying heavy load without excessive volume change. So suppose below ground level, if the honeycomb structure is there, right? And if you are going to construct the structure on the honeycomb, you are going to construct the structure on the soil, which is having honeycomb structure. This is called honeycomb structure below the ground level. In that case, it can take the more load, right? The structure might be broken by driving piles into a deposit of silt having honeycomb. So what does it mean? If you are going to, suppose you want to construct a deep foundation, okay, so definitely in case of deep foundation, the pile foundation comes under the deep foundation. If you are going to drive the piles, the the structure is going to break, right? So what is the example for the honeycomb structure? The fine sand dumped for filling without densification. If you are going to fill the lowland area using the fine sand, right? As you know, the size of the fine sand as per the IS classification varies from 75 micron to 425 micron. Size is called as fine sand. So if you are going to fill the lowland area using the fine sand, the structure like honeycomb will be formed. Next, we can see the type of a structure is flocculent and dispersed structure. These two types of a structure we shall talk now. This structure is characteristic of fine grain soil. Whenever I talk the fine grain soil, definitely we can say the particle less than 75 micron size. So as we know that interparticle forces plays a predominant role in case of fine grain soil. A flocculated structure formed in a freshwater environment. Suppose freshwater environment, suppose that the soil is going to be deposited by the river, right? In that case, whatever the structures are going to be formed below the ground level, right? In that case, we can say it is a flocculated structure. And the particles orient perpendicular to one another. You can see here the figures has been shown a big size figure, but it will be really, these are the soil particles. And you can see the particles are perpendicular to each other. You can see this particle perpendicular to this particle. Similarly, on this particle is perpendicular, right? Or there are edge to edge contact also, you can say. That means this edge of this particle is going to be contact with this edge. Similarly, the edge to edge contact also we can see, or perpendicular to the one another also we can see, right? Next is the dispersed structure. The first one was the flocculated structure, and this is called dispersed structure that forms in salt water environment. Whenever the soil is going to be deposited by salt water, in that case, whatever the structure is going to be formed below the ground level, right? In case of fine grain soil, which will be the dispersed structure. The structure will be like that, right? Below the ground level. And you can see one important thing, say, the particles are parallel to one another. Orientation means direction, how the particles are accumulated, how the particles are deposited, right? The particles are deposited parallel to each other, right? That is the the characteristics of dispersed structure, which is deposited with the help of salt water, right? Particle have to face-to-face contact. You can say this face and this face contact is there. This face and this face contact is there. Parallel is also, and face-to-face contact is also there. Whereas in case of flocculated structures, we can say the particles are perpendicular to each other, and they have to have edge-to-edge contact. Now we shall see the next characteristics: a structure of composite soil. This is one of the also this topic also comes under the structure of soil. Depending upon the relative proportion of coarse grain soil and fine grain soil, two types of structures of composite soil can be possible. See, sometimes what happens, as we know, normally we used to say the fine grain soil, cohesive soil, cohesionless soil. Cohesive soil, the clay soil, we used to say the cohesive soil, and the cohesionless soil, under that category, we normally consider the sand and gravel. But if the coarse grain soil and the fine grain soil both are mixed together, right, they are also going to form a structure below the ground level. So what type of structures will be possible? We can see. The first type of structure is called as coarse grained skeleton structure. You can see in coarse grained skeleton, the void space of the single grain structure is occupied by clay particles known as binder. What is going to happen here? In coarse grained structure, you can see this figure and this figure. What is happening in this figure? All this coarse grain soil, the bigger particles, bigger size, will have contact to each other, right? And definitely it works as a skeleton, right? Definitely it is going to provide more strength. And whatever the voids are there into the bigger size of the particles, that voids are going to be filled by the fine grain soil. So this type of soil will have more strength, right? They can take the more structure load. Whereas in case of cohesive matrix, suppose in both the cases, coarse grain and fine grains are there. You can see here also fine grain and coarse grains are mixed together. Here also fine grain and coarse grains are mixed together. But the amount of cohesive soil or clay soil is more compared to the coarse grain soil. So what is going to happen, right? You can see here no contact is there in between the larger size of the particle. So what will happen if the load you are going to apply the load, or if you are going to construct the structure on such type of soil, definitely this bigger size will be scattered and the settlement will take place. That means this type of soil will be highly compressive in nature, right? It cannot take the more load. That is written here. In cohesive matrix, the clay content is more, so that bulky particles or coarse grain are not in position to have a particle-to-particle contact. The clay constitutes the load-bearing member, and hence the soil formation is relatively more compressible. In this case, more compressible because this will be scattered if the load is going to be applied. But here, these bigger size particles are in contact, and the voids, smaller particles are filled, so it will take the more load. So this is all about your today topics. Thank you very much.